Mike Zimmer is pissed off that he does not have a new contract. As it stands right now, he's on the final year of his current deal for head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. So we're going to react to it. And the report comes from Chad Graff of The Athletic, in which he reported, quote, Zimmer has been irked by the fact that it's now July and he remains without a new contract, according to multiple sources who requested anonymity to speak freely about a sensitive topic. He's begun preparing for what seems like a growing possibility that he may coach this season in the final year of his contract. Now, if the question is, does Mike Zimmer have the right to be upset? Well, of course he does. You can't tell anyone how they should feel. Mike Zimmer certainly has the right to feel however it is that he so chooses to do so. Okay, fine. Now, if the question is, in my opinion, is there validity behind the frustration of Mike Zimmer? My response is no, absolutely not. And I am very aware of the fact that his overall coaching record is pretty impressive, 57, 38, and 1. I'm also aware of the fact that before he came to Minnesota, the Vikings were downright awful. Both things are true, no argument there. However, those two factors alone should not justify a long-term contract extension. The goal of all teams across the league is to maximize their talent to yield optimal productivity. Mike Zimmer is heading into his 7th season as head coach. After 6 seasons, Mike Zimmer and the Minnesota Vikings have failed to make the playoffs in consecutive years. If they're not playing the Saints in the playoffs, they're winless. And not only are they winless in those games, they're not even competitive. So much so that starting from 2015, so that marks Mike Zimmer's first playoff appearance after the 2015 season. So we're counting all 28 teams that have made the playoffs from the start of that time and have lost a playoff game. So Super Bowl champions, whatever year that they won it, they're taken out of the equation. In their playoff losses, the Minnesota Vikings, led by Mike Zimmer, have averaged 8.6 points per game. That's 26th out of 28 teams. The margin of defeat, the average margin of defeat in those losses is by more than 16 points. That's 21st out of 28 teams. You lose in the playoffs by an average margin of more than 2 possessions. The average yards differential in your losses, the opposing teams outgain you by 109 yards. That's 21st out of 28 teams. And then in those losses, the opposing teams, they get 6 first downs more on average than the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings, under Mike Zimmer in the playoffs, have been one of the least competitive teams. That's not hating. That's just fact. Also, when you think about the elite pass-catching weapons that Zimmer has had on his roster at his disposal, I'm thinking about Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. Together, when they were both healthy on the field at the same time, were the best wide receiver tandem in the league since Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan Bolden of the Arizona Cardinals. You add into the mix Kyle Rudolph, and more recently, Irv Smith Jr. Imagine having those dudes on your roster in the passing game and saying, you know what would be a fantastic idea? Let's run the football, let the defense do all the work, and let's have a minimal passing attack in our offense. Are you kidding me? So normally, when it comes to coaching, you're thinking, let's do whatever's necessary. Whatever we have to do to win games, we're going to do it. No, it wasn't about that. With Mike Zimmer, based on his actions, he wants to win his way. So when I hear these reports, Mike Zimmer, he's irked that he doesn't have a new contract extension. He needs to be signed long-term. That's how he feels. My response is, who do you think you are? What have you done in 6 years as a head coach? Well, the Vikings were nothing before Mike Zimmer came along as head coach. Oh, okay. Did you know that Marvin Lewis, before he became head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, the Bengals were on a 13-year playoff drought. Hadn't made the playoffs in 13 years. They finally made the playoffs his 3rd year as head coach. They made the playoffs under Marvin Lewis 7 times. Roughly every other year, he was a head coach. Kind of like Mike Zimmer, right? Should the Bengals, should they have kept Marvin Lewis too? Oh, well, Andy Reid and Bill Cowher, you can't rag on Zim because sometimes it takes time. Andy Reid and Bill Cowher, they finally won championships long into their head coaching tenure. Oh, that's what we're doing? Okay, speaking of Andy Reid, Andy Reid, after his first 6 seasons in his head coaching career, was with the Philadelphia Eagles from 99 to 2004. During that time frame, the Eagles made the playoffs in 5 straight seasons. They made the NFC Championship game in 4 straight seasons. They also made a Super Bowl appearance in the 2004 playoffs against the New England Patriots. They lost by a final score of 24-21. We get to Bill Cowher. Bill Cowher, after his first 6 seasons in his head coaching career, this was with the Pittsburgh Steelers from 92 to 97, the Steelers made the playoffs all 6 years. They also had 3 conference championship game appearances and 1 Super Bowl appearance. Don't you dare disrespect Andy Reid and Bill Cowher by comparing them to Mike Zimmer. My personal replacement is either Irked, and of course, Mike Zimmer deserves to be head coach in 2020 after beating the Saints. Okay, fine. But if shit hits the fan and they need to get rid of Mike Zimmer, then my personal replacement is Irked or Lincoln Riley, now that Mike McCarthy is the new head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. The embarrassing big game and playoff losses under Mike Zimmer have quite honestly been no different than the historically embarrassing losses suffered by the Vikings before Mike Zimmer even became head coach. In fact, if you go back and revisit those losses where it's like you're consistently watching this team shoot themselves in the foot to where it's like you can't even give yourselves a fair chance. Do you even belong on the same football field as these dudes? It is exhausting. If there's any fan base in the NFL, in the National Football League, if there's any fan base that deserves a championship, it's us. So making the playoffs every other year and squeaking out a last-second win against one team twice, or getting absolutely waxed in the playoffs despite having some of the most talented rosters during your tenure is not good enough to get a long-term contract extension. What the fuck is so hard to understand about that? Well, do you remember the defense, what it was like before Mike Zimmer came here? The Mike Zimmer looked at the trajectory of the defense since Mike Zimmer got here. He's the fucking head coach. Having a bad spouse that you decide to stick with, knowing that you could do better because, well, you know what? They're better than the last spouse that I had before that, is still a bad spouse. Be a better head coach and you will get your long-term contract extension. That's it. Be a better head coach and I will shut up Mike Zimmer. As in, I will shut up. Not shut up Mike Zimmer, but I will shut up, Mike Zimmer. We do this at least once a week. Mediocre at Best Sports Podcast with Realistic Randy. Check me out on Twitter at realistic_Randy. Facebook at realistic Randy. We'll see you next time.